discussion that we started with the digestive system. Remember, the digestive system is important because it is breaking down our nutrients and helping us to absorb those nutrients. Without it, we would essentially starve to death. So we need to have that digestive system functioning properly. And what I want to do is go back and we talked about the stomach at the end. Remember that the stomach can expand, and as it expands, it can hold more food, and then it will empty. It will churn and move the food around, and it will propel that down towards the small intestine. And what I want to do next is take a look at the small intestine and go through the large intestine and talk about some of the accessory organs that we have. In fact, I might do that right away right now, in that we have a liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, and those three structures or organs help us in the digestion of food. In fact, why don't I take a moment, and I do want to mention a little bit as regards to the three accessory organs here. We'll come back to the GI tract here in a minute from the stomach, but it's important to know what these do because they play a role here in digestion. And let's first of all take a look at the pancreas. The pancreas is an organ that's located just behind, it's found just behind the stomach. And the pancreas has a number of different functions, digestive-wise. We're going to focus on the digestive function since we're dealing with the digestive system at this point. One of the things that the pancreas does is it secretes many digestive enzymes. Remember, enzymes are the major chemical substance that helps us to break down our food. Let me give you some examples. It secretes the enzyme sucrase. Oops, let's change that. Sucrase. Maltase. It also will secrete some peptidase enzymes, which help with the digestion of protein. There's also an enzyme called pancreatic lipase that digests lipids. So many different enzymes come from the pancreas. The other thing that it produces is it produces a substance called sodium bicarbonate. And this acts as an antacid. And it helps to neutralize the hydrochloric acid from the stomach. Let me give you an example of how this works. All right? Here is the esophagus. Here's the stomach right here. Okay? Esophagus here, stomach here. The stomach has a pH of about 2.0. It's very, very acidic. I mentioned that in a previous lecture. And that acidity does not damage the stomach normally because remember you've got this layer of mucus here that prevents the stomach from getting eroded. Without that, you'd have ulcerations. Now, when we get down here, and here's the pancreas here. I'm going to draw it in like this. Here's the pancreas. The pancreas is secreting a substance called sodium bicarbonate. Now, when this acid comes through the pyloric sphincter, here's the pyloric sphincter here, the pH shifts once you get into the duodenum, and the pH in the duodenum is around 5.8. Now remember, pH-wise, something that has a pH of 7 is neutral. So this pH has gone from very acidic to moderately acidic. And that shift in pH is because the sodium bicarbonate there goes through a neutralization reaction. Let me give you an example of what happens here with this. We take, in this instance, the HCl plus the sodium bicarbonate. Those will react together and form salt, sodium chloride, plus H2O, plus carbon dioxide, okay? And so you've taken something, this acid here, hydrochloric acid, this is the sodium bicarbonate, and essentially what happens is what comes of that reaction is salt, water, and carbon dioxide. So it's neutralized that. It causes this neutralization because we don't want to have all that acidity in the small intestine. And so the pancreas basically produces this pancreatic juice that's laden with enzymes and sodium bicarbonate. And it also produces insulin and glucagon. We talked about those in a previous lecture, and those controlling blood glucose level. That's more of its endocrine function. But those are the two main things it does digestively for us, is that it produces the bicarbonate, which is basically your body's own antacid, to neutralize your stomach acid in the small intestine. And secondly, it produces a variety of enzymes that help you digest your food. Now, the other key organs here, the liver, okay? Now, Josh, let me ask you this. The liver, and let me show you here, the liver is a very large organ in the upper abdominal cavity. And do you know, Josh, can you live without a liver? No, you've got to have a functional liver. Now, what the liver does, as far as digestion-wise and just with the system, there's a couple of major functions I want to mention. First of all, digestively, it produces a substance called bile, okay? Produces bile. Now, bile is an emulsifier. And by emulsifier, what I mean by that is it mixes fat and water together. That's the purpose of the bile, okay, is to mix fat and water together, all right? And the liver produces the bile, and the bile will get then, it gets, and I'm going to tie this in here. Well, let me back up. I'm going to finish off with the liver here for a minute. The liver also has some other major functions. I want to point out what those liver functions are. It detoxifies the blood. It will remove, when I talk about detoxification, it will detoxify alcohol. It will detoxify other drugs like ibuprofen, acetaminophen, cocaine, marijuana, a variety of things. But it's our major detox organ. It also will store, it stores iron, and also vitamins A, D, E, and K. So when you're a little short on your iron consumption for a week or a month, you can pull that out of the liver, okay? Excuse me. I had to sneeze there. I'm sorry about that. It also makes albumins and fibrinogen are synthesized there. When we talked about albumins as far as part of the blood, fibrinogen is needed for clotting of the blood. It also can store glycogen. We've talked about glycogen before, that's stored carbohydrate. It also is involved with urea synthesis. Now, urea is a breakdown product of using amino acids for energy. It'll synthesize urea. And it also helps producing lipoproteins. These would be like LDLs and HDLs. Helps in regulation of blood cholesterol levels, okay? And for the most part, it's something that you cannot do without, okay? These functions are too vital. So you have to have a healthy, functioning liver to survive. Now, with the liver is an interesting organ, and I want to just show you a couple of anatomically some things about it. First off, let me go back here and show you this diagram. And with this particular diagram, oops, let's focus in here. Here's the liver right here. You can see it in a nice brown color. Above the liver, you have a diaphragm right here, okay? And there is a ligament that passes through it called the falciform ligament. Now, the liver is a multi-lobe structure, and you don't need all of your liver to survive. In fact, there have been instances here where people have actually donated a lobe of their liver to a loved one who's had a liver not being functional. Now, this is on a different page. I just want to show you here. Coming out of the liver, here's the liver shown there in brown. Coming out of the liver, there is hepatic duct. And I'm just going to show you this because how it works together with the gallbladder. Under your liver, you have a gallbladder. It's shown here as a green structure. And from the liver, you've got a hepatic duct that leads into a common bile duct. Off of that common bile duct to the gallbladder, there is a cystic duct right here, okay? Now, the secretions of bile will oftentimes come from the gallbladder. The gallbladder is involved only in one function, that is the storage of bile. And when bile is needed to help break down fat, it will pass through the cystic duct, through the common bile duct, and then into the duodenum right here, where the fat would be, like from the eggnog or cheese or whatever it is that you might have that's fatty. Now, with the liver itself, and I want to go back here for just a second, the liver has a variety of lobes, okay? There is a left lobe, all right, to the liver. There is a right lobe to the liver, okay? It's actually 4 lobes. And then there is a caudate and quadrate lobe. They're not showing them here, but there's a number of lobes to the liver, okay? And then you can see the gallbladder right underneath it there, all right? So with the liver, let me just point out, back this out just a moment. The liver has 4 lobes, a right and a left, a quadrate, and a caudate lobe. And it is a necessary, it's necessary for life. You cannot live without a liver, okay? Now, there are some different issues I do want to bring up with the liver because there's some major issues that people can face. One is that there are different blood infections. One is what's referred to as hepatitis, and there's actually, I think, 4 or 5 varieties of hepatitis. Hepatitis is when we have inflammation of the liver. This is usually due to a virus. And hepatitis, there's hepatitis A, Hep A, that a person can get from sewage. You can get this from eating, drinking contaminated water, eating fruits and vegetables that have been watered with water that's been contaminated. So again, it's usually found in water and food. There's also hepatitis B. And do you know how hepatitis B is spread, Josh?
I do not.
This one primarily comes through blood and sexual contact. Okay, blood and sexual contact is how that one's oftentimes spread. This is very contagious. Now, we have a vaccine for hepatitis B. Those of you going into a healthcare field like nursing will have to get a hepatitis B, vaccinated against hepatitis B. Then there are other ones also. The problem with these is these can result oftentimes also in liver cancer and can be deadly. So that's why we oftentimes recommend people get vaccinated against hepatitis. Now, there's a couple of other things I want to mention that can affect the liver. One is cirrhosis. And cirrhosis is basically a chronic disease of the liver. And this is, normally it's a couple stage process. One, it becomes fatty, the liver enlarges. Then it becomes fibrous, it gets fibrosis, it gets scar tissue built up into it. And then lastly, it will start to become, basically it will start to die. Now, do you know what oftentimes causes cirrhosis of the liver? Do you know, Josh? Exactly, okay. Alcohol abuse. And some alcoholics, I mean, literally will drink their liver to death. And when the liver goes, we go with it. So it's important to have a good functioning liver. One of the problems that results early on when there's liver issues, whether it's hepatitis or cirrhosis, is sometimes people will appear jaundice. And jaundice is when there is a yellow pigment to the skin and whites of the eyes. And that yellowing is usually due to damage to the liver. The liver's been damaged, and it spills over some bilirubin. Bilirubin is a pigment that is yellow, and that will spill over into the blood. Okay. Now, the last endocrine structure, or not endocrine, digestive gland or organ that I want to deal with here is the gallbladder. And the gallbladder, as I mentioned before, is located under the liver. Okay, it's located under the liver, and its sole job is to store bile. Okay, store bile. It's basically like a storage tank. And let me go back to this picture here, right here. Now, bile, as I mentioned before, is needed for emulsification of fat. And here sits the gallbladder. Here is the cystic duct leading out of it to the common bile duct here. All right, and it leads into then the duodenum. All right, so that's basically kind of the setup there. Now, I want to mention, you should be aware that the hepatic duct drains the liver. The cystic duct, C-Y-S-T-I-C, drains the gallbladder. Those both dump in then to the common bile duct. Now, one of the issues that some people have is with the gallbladder, it can develop what we refer to as gallstones. And these gallstones are made up of cholesterol and salts. They can be very painful and block the cystic duct. Oops. Now, in that case, if I have, and let me make this drawing here. Here's the gallbladder, GB. This is the cystic duct. This is the liver. Okay. If I have a stone right here blocking that, what do I do to treat that then, Josh? Do you know?
A physician would do it in surgery.
Okay, and remove what? Just the duct? And they'd actually take out the whole gallbladder. We're going to cut this right here and ligate this and remove this whole thing. That removal of the gallbladder is called a cholecystectomy. And that's the removal of the gallbladder. GB is gallbladder, not Green Bay in this case. Now, in doing that, we still have bile produced. Remember, the function of the liver was to produce the bile. So bile can still come from the liver and come down through the common bile duct because we still have the common bile duct intact. And you need to have bile to break down fat. So bile still being produced. Now, what can happen when this occurs? Remember, you don't have to have a gallbladder. You can live a very happy, healthy life without a gallbladder or an appendix. So those are just structures in the body that we don't necessarily have to have to survive. Now, the other part to the digestive tract. So we've looked at the three major digestive organs: the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder. I want to go back to the small intestine, because the small intestine, we left off with the stomach, and then I said we're going to the small intestine. One of the things to keep in mind, and the reason that I diverted over to talking about the endocrine glands, is this. Here, where we have, the stomach was over here, okay? Here's the stomach over here and so forth, all right? Here's the stomach, drawn it real large and big. But this is where the duodenum would be. And the duodenum is what receives a number of those, duodenum. That receives those secretions from the pancreas and the liver / gallbladder. And what happens when we get to the small intestine, SI is going to be small intestine here. This is the site where you have the majority of digestion and absorption occurring. The majority of digestion and absorption occurs in your small intestine. And as it occurs there, what's happening is we've got the three sections: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. And in the small intestine, it's really kind of an interesting area, because within the small intestine, you have a massive surface area that consists of a variety of things. One of the things that you have in there is you have what are referred to as plica, or plica circularis. And these are basically pleats to the wall. It's like a pleated wall. Second thing is, there are many villi. Villi are finger-like extensions. And thirdly, on top of those, you have microvilli. And these are small finger-like extensions on top of the villi. Let me show you here how this looks. Here is a diagram. Now, the wall is folded. This is a section of the small intestinal wall. You notice how it's pleated? It comes out like this. On those pleats, if I magnify it, you have these finger-like extensions that stick up here. This is called a villus. That's a singular. Villi is plural, but you've got literally thousands upon thousands of these. And then what you have coming up through that villus is you've got capillaries, all right, through which the nutrients are going to be absorbed from here and go in this way, okay? And then you also have a lacteal, or a lymph vessel, right through the middle of that, all right? In actuality, they look like this under a microscope, okay? All these villi and so forth. So a massive surface area, and what happens in that area is we have a lot of digestion. So what's going to happen here is this, as far as the digestion and the absorption, all right? What will happen is essentially is this. Let me cover this briefly here. You will take cheese that you eat, like on lasagna. That has a lot of triglyceride in it. That will come into contact with bile and lipase. That will break that down into glycerol plus fatty acids. You will also take things like starch. This will get broken down by amylase and eventually become glucose. You will take protein. This will come into contact with enzymes like trypsin. Eventually they'll be broken down into amino acids. These will then, those that are water soluble, plus just the water that you drink, the minerals that you eat, like calcium in milk and so forth, and the vitamins, those will all then get absorbed into the capillaries in the lacteals. Oops, capillaries in the villi, in the villi, all right? The glycerol and fatty acids, those will go into the lacteals because they're fatty, all right? And then they'll get processed. Now, in the processing, remember, those are going to oftentimes end up going to one's liver. And you'll take the extra glucose, possibly make it into glycogen, or just send it on to the brain or the muscles. The amino acids can get stored, or they can be made into albumin and fibrinogen or muscle tissue by muscle cells. And the fatty acids can then get also sent to fat stores in the body. Now, the last part to this is the large intestine. So once we get to the large intestine, pretty much all the digestion's been done. When we get to the large intestine, that's also known as your colon, okay? It lacks the villi and the microvilli. It doesn't have any of those structures, the villi and the plica circularis. It doesn't have any. It lacks those. But what we do have that's a little bit different here in the large intestine is it does have pouch-like structures called haustra. And these are little pouch-like areas, pouch-like structures that can store the material in the colon. And you'll see this on this part. Let me show you a diagram here of the colon. This shows this quite nicely here. Okay, let's look at this diagram for a moment here. And on this diagram, this is just showing the colon in and of itself. There's the appendix. We talked about that earlier. The first part here, the cecum, then the ascending colon, transverse colon coming across here, descending colon coming this way, and then when we kind of curves at a horizontal angle, that's the sigmoid colon, rectum, and anal canal. Now, in looking at this, what you'll notice is this. You notice this pouch-like appearance. These are haustra, okay? It's not structurally as sound as the small intestine. And the reason is there's this what's called a taenia coli. It's an incomplete longitudinal muscle layer right there, all right? So you got many of these haustra, all right, that make up the wall of the colon. Now, with the colon, it does have some major functions. One is that it helps to absorb water, okay? A lot of water absorption occurs in that area. And it also helps to eliminate waste. It will, as it absorbs the water, it will form feces. Now, Josh, let me ask you this. If we have the movements that are here, there are two types. One is peristalsis. The second thing is mass movements, where things move forward and then we have the pressure on the colon and we feel like we have to defecate. And the third one is what's referred to as hostile turning. Now, let me ask you this. If you have slow transit, of the components in your colon, you end up with what do we commonly call that if you have slow transit and you're absorbing a lot of water out of the colon?
Constipation.
You got it. And if we have very rapid transit, the opposite there, Josh, is you got it. And diarrhea can be due to bacteria and so forth in the food, but constipation or diarrhea. Now, these mass movements occur almost like clockwork with some people. And when we have mass movements, we will oftentimes have to defecate. And there we're talking about regularity. And when we defecate, oftentimes our fecal matter consists of fiber, things that we didn't digest, because we don't digest fiber, water, and bacteria. That's why it's important to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, okay? But that's what we oftentimes find in our fecal matter. Now, let me just mention, as far as one of the major problems with the colon is what we refer to as colon cancer. You know, the more common problems are, of course, diarrhea and constipation. But people do suffer from colon cancer, and I do want to talk about what's referred to as colorectal cancer. And with colorectal cancer, this is cancer oftentimes in the sigmoid colon or rectum. Now, let me give you an example of the problems here with the colorectal cancer. When we have colorectal cancer, here's the sigmoid colon here, and then going down into the rectum. Here's the sigmoid colon, rectum expands, and then the anal canal here, all right? If we have a tumor that's growing out here in the sigmoid colon, all right, like this, due to just different carcinogens possibly in our food, when that comes out like that, what happens as far as some of the symptoms? There's a couple of different key symptoms that I want to make you aware of that can occur with colon cancer, all right? One of those is frequent constipation, because if we back things up, when we back things up like this, it constipates a person. And another thing is pencil stools. Now, keep in mind that there are blood vessels here, and colon cancer can metastasize and get into the blood and kill. Now, normally, these are some of the, or a third thing is a bloody stool. If you ever have blood in your stool, it's a good idea to get it checked, okay? But frequent constipation, pencil stools, and a bloody stool are bad signs, okay? And normally what we do is we can do a sigmoidoscopy where we actually scope. We can do a scope up in that area. We wind a camera up through here, and we can actually look physically in a doctor's office to see what is going on in that part of the anatomy. But that's one of the major issues that sometimes we face with our colon, okay? Now, as we wrap things up, I do want to just wrap things up briefly here with what happens as we age, okay? Now, with this whole system, it's primarily composed of smooth muscle, not the entire thing. The smooth muscle starts in the esophagus. But as we age, Josh, do you know what happens to our muscle tissue as we age?
It weakens.
It weakens. So we'll have atrophy of the smooth muscle lining. Now, when that occurs, what's going to happen to the rate of peristalsis then? Do you know, Josh?
It'll slow down.
It'll slow down. And what does that mean then? It's going to result in what?
Slow down.
Which is called? Exactly. And a lot of you maybe have older relatives, and they, they're constipated a lot, because especially this constipation, this could be chronic. That when you tie aging together, aging and inactivity, retirement, that can be a big deal, okay? So oftentimes that can happen. Another major issue is that as we age, that there can be changes to the esophagus, and that can result in things like I'm going to write here, gastroesophageal reflux, where there is chronic heartburn. And it's very frequent, and again, stomach gas is entering into the esophagus. Another issue that oftentimes people face is diverticulitis. Now, let me just finish with this. Diverticula are outpocketings on the haustra. So you have a haustra, haustra, haustra. Here you have a haustra, haustra, and then you got this outpocketing here. It's weak here and here. That's the diverticula right there. That gets inflamed and can cause significant pain. And sometimes we have to do a resection of the colon to help that individual out with that issue. So those are some of the common issues we face as far as getting older and the effects on our digestive system. With that, I thank you again for tuning in. Keep studying and have a great day. Goodbye. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue on with the discussion that we started with the digestive system. Remember that